Hey everyone, this is Neil with Portal to Ascension, broadcasting from the Portal to Ascension conference, and we are having a lot of fun. You're checking us out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Portal to Ascension. Click the subscribe below, click the notification bell. Please follow us and join us. And yes, we are at our biggest event that we've created in 10 years. It's literally a 1,000th event production, but not so literal because it's plus or minus 20. It's around there, and we're having a lot of fun.
Really amazing speakers,
Right.
rocking and rolling, and fabulous music.
Right, and it's just really an experience from the moment you come in to the moment you leave. You're on this wave, this soft little train ride into the realm of consciousness so that we can not only uncover our true ancient history, the truth of extraterrestrials and UFOs, advanced technology, and all this information that can change the paradigm that we're in. Now, I'm here with a really good friend of mine, Tricia McCannon, who Portal to Ascension, we have been actually doing events with her for the last 3 years, and I would say maybe one every 3 months online. We've toured down the West Coast. We've done a weekend retreat in Atlanta. I've stayed at her house. We've had a lot of fun and a lot of good times together, and we've got this information out to thousands of people. And I am just super honored and blessed that when I thought of this event, yes, she was one of the first people that came up in my mind because the information she conveys, the amount of presentations and awareness is really full circle. Most people into consciousness, a lot of you watching this, are into all different aspects: nutrition, ascension, disclosure, ancient aliens. And Tricia really talks about all of that. So we have her here, and she has just finished a presentation yesterday. It was on Antarctica and evidence for a worldwide pyramid culture. So we're going to talk about her and what that presentation was about. So Tricia, hello.
Oh, my total pleasure. And let me say, it's really an honor to be here. I love Neil and his wife Sol because they're not only incredibly intelligent and very holistic and conscious. They're super smart, but they have really great hearts, and their intentions are pure. And I think, especially in this new consciousness that we're trying to awaken on the planet, some people can talk it, but they can't really walk it. And so it's real important. It's difficult sometimes when you're trying to bring a lot of light into the world and change a world paradigm, which is really what we're all about. You guys out there in the audience are about that. The person sitting behind the camera filming us is like that. And of course, Neil and I are components of that. And sometimes when great light shows up and it has the potential to change, the forces of darkness, meaning basically our egos, can show up to create all these crazy negative dramas. And really, we want to let all that fall away to try to really be in the heart and in the spirit that allows that consciousness frequency shift to happen. And anyway, that's what I love about you, Neil, and it's what I love about all your events. So thank you for having the courage to do them.
Definitely. So thank you so much for that. And so, as we both know, you have a lot of different presentations. You've done a lot on that platform.
I have.
I feel that ancient history is probably one of your favorite topics, like it is mine, because that's what you go deep into. You not only connect, like Antarctica, for example. People talk about Antarctica, they show pictures of the ice melting, right? But you tap it into our ancient past, the connection to Admiral Byrd, the worldwide connection to the advanced pyramid culture. Why don't you just start by telling us about what is a worldwide pyramid culture and what happened in Antarctica?
Okay, so as many of you may know, I'm a historian and I'm also a clairvoyant. So as a clairvoyant, I've had the ability since I was little to go back into the timeline. And, I do personal readings for people. And for many years, and I've done them for 35 years, for probably the first 4, I was only going 3, 4, 5,000 years back in world history. Then I found myself going back 20,000 years, 30,000 years, 50,000 years. And it was like, holy smokes. It wasn't just, barbaric cavemen. It was advanced civilizations that were on this planet before the one that we're in now. We can call them Atlantis, we can call them Lemuria, Poseidia. There are many names for these civilizations. But I saw, and sometimes I would see my client actually be living in that civilization, but sometimes they would come in on a spaceship, believe it or not. Most of them look completely human. They came from the Pleiades or from the Sirius system. And so I was like, holy smokes. And so, of course, like many of us, I'd always been intrigued by Atlantis. I'd always collected books. James Churchward, of course, was the very first one, Colonel Churchward, who wrote the book on Lemuria and Atlantis so long ago. And I began to do really research about it. And what I've discovered is that in the last few years, as we've had satellite imaging and ground penetrating radar and sonar, we have discovered over 752,000 pyramids all around the world, not just in Central America and South America hidden by the jungle, but in China, in Europe, in Africa, in Egypt, in Alaska, and in Antarctica. And of course, the traditional version that we thought was that Antarctica had been covered for ice for 112 million years. Now we're discovering that basically we had a worldwide pole shift 12,000 years ago, 11,500, 600, 700,000 years ago, at the time that the meteor hit the mid-Atlantic ridge, splitting the ridge and taking down Atlantis, creating the great flood that we hear about in the Bible, and creating basically a pole shift. When that happened, it flash froze not only the woolly mammoths with the buttercups in their mouths that we know about, but it also flash froze the civilization that was in Antarctica, that continent with the cities and with the pyramids. And to date, there's 7 countries down there, plus the United States of America, that are basically trying to unearth the hidden technology in cities. They found a city through magnetic resonance where a lake was, the largest lake in Antarctica. Antarctica is about 500 million square miles. The average temperature is 49 degrees below zero, and 98% of it is covered in ice, but it is melting. And so under Lake Vostok, they've now discovered a city. They've gone down 2.5 miles underground and discovered, that there are pyramids down there that are 4 times the size of the Great Pyramid of Cheops. And of course, it's all very hush-hush, because as usual, the military-industrial complex has a rush to the finish line to try to be able to get the technology and back engineer it. And they have discovered tall extraterrestrial aliens with the large heads that we see in the Mayan and the Aztec and Incan lands, also in Egypt. They've also discovered regular-sized humans. And there appears that there was a city there and also a laboratory. So that's kind of what we know so far. And it's been there have been people from the Vatican that have gone down. One of the cardinals closest to the Pope was sent down to check it out. There have been political figures that have gone down there. There have been military people, of course, that have gone down there. We have a very large base down there in McMurdo with 1,000 to 1,200 personnel. So, they're not letting a lot of this information out at this point, but clearly it shows that we had advanced civilizations on this planet.
Right.
And that the pyramids were able, because of their ability to tap into the resonance of the magnetic field of the planet, to create torsion fields, natural torsion fields. And by connecting these torsion fields, they were somehow, let us say, amplifying the natural magnetic resonance of the Earth and tapping into maybe a form of what we would call free energy today, meaning it's not a fossil fuel-based energy system.
So you've told me about Atlantis, and Atlantis fell in 3 stages, right? I want to touch on that a bit. What can we talk about a timeline of what happened to Atlantis, maybe the beginning of Atlantis, and when it started falling? And did everybody, because a lot of the popular culture talks about Atlantis, and not too many people talk about it falling in 3 stages. It's almost like it just fell down and all the inhabitants of Atlantis went with it. But there's evidence to suggest that these individuals went to different parts of the world. So can you talk about the timeline and go into that?
I'm happy to, yeah. Atlantis was really once like a continent in the Atlantic Ocean, and it went from about 100,000 years ago to about 52,000 years ago, where obviously we had developed some advanced technologies at that point because they were working with crystal technology, and they were using them primarily in temples for healing. But they had a problem at that point where these giant sloths and giant bats and giant, critters basically were up in the mountains coming down into the plains and disturbing people. And we found, of course, the bones of these. I've been to museums where they've got, 12-foot tall giant sloths. And so we know those animals existed, but basically the fire crystal that was being used for positive purposes got used, conscripted by the military-industrial complex of their day, and unfortunately they created an antimatter device that broke the continent up into 5 continent islands. And the big section that went down was where the Sargasso Sea is today, which is kind of off of the southeastern coast of America. And even sailors talk about the legends, the haunted legends of crossing that Sargasso Sea because it's eerily still. And then the next incarnation would have started after that, where they had to put themselves back together. So the 5 continent islands were up from about 52,000 to 28,000 years ago, and then 2 of them went down, so there were only 3 left. And then from 28,000 to 22,000, the earthquakes and tremors continued to where eventually there was only 1 continent island left. And that's the one that Plato talks about in the Timaeus and in the Republic. So that was the last seeding of Atlantis. So when we talk about Atlantis, most people are talking about that. They're talking about that big continent island, which was kind of shaped like a, Vesica Piscis, kind of like a diamond. And they went through, so a lot of high consciousness souls chose to incarnate onto the planet from around 21,000 to about 16,000 years because they knew that this was an opportunity for us to not fall into the same traps that humanity continually seems to fall into. Edgar Cayce would call it the sons of light, people like all of us who are working for unity consciousness, and the sons of Baal, he referred to it as that, which are basically people who are ego-driven and they don't really care about themselves. They're on a win-lose, mindset. So there was a golden age of Atlantis from about 16,500 years ago to about 14,000 years ago, where we did reach a very high level of consciousness. We were using telepathy, telekinesis, and we were really, really doing our job. And the galactic councils came in. We were actually part of the galactic community. The Pleiadians, the Sirians, the Andromedeans, very human-looking people, and we were invited to join the Galactic Federation, and we became a star capital within the galaxy.
What years was this?
From about 16,500 to about 14,000 years ago. And this is a time actually when there was mega explosion in the Cygnus system. Cygnus is a constellation that looks like a swan. It's close to the dark rift in the center of the galaxy. And what's interesting is that now there is an explosion like that going off. Scientists are calling it the second Big Bang. And so it's from the center of the galaxy, and it's creating an energetic wave that really is bombarding everything in the galaxy. And certainly our sun and our solar system is getting bombarded as well. And of course it promises to uplift the frequency of everything around us. So, when Atlantis fell, we were really crossing below the galactic equator around 12,000 years ago. And so we kind of went into a time of deep forgetting. The mystery schools were set up so that we could begin to remember our own divine origins. They understood that knowledge is power. For example, in the mystery schools, the 5 Platonic solids, you were not allowed to learn the last of the solids, the dodecahedron, until your 3rd level of initiation, because they understood that the dodecahedron was used in the construction of the atom bomb. And so they knew that knowledge was power, and knowledge in the wrong hands of those that were not morally and ethically responsible could cause great harm to the earth. So consequently, we're sort of in a similar place right now, except that instead of dropping below the galactic equator, we're actually coming up where we're crossing it. It takes about 1,000 years to cross it. And the whole Mayan calendar thing, the 2012, where it's like, oh my God, the end of the world. No, it's not the end of the world, but it's the midpoint of the 1,000 years of crossing through the galactic equator. So it's a turning point where we're kind of leaving that old paradigm behind. And as we notice, there are lots of people fighting tooth and nail to hold the old paradigm in place, power, greed, rape, pillage, destroy the earth, you win, lose paradigm. We know it's still in place. We can see it in our politics on the television every single day. And we have the right and the choice to stand up and make a difference. We have the right and the choice to choose life, to choose unity, to choose the protection of the earth, the protection of nature, to put politicians in that are actually people of integrity and kindness, that are not sexist or racist or, whatever you want to call them. But, to pick people that are more evolved, like the people at this conference and the people who are listening to this broadcast. Maybe you guys should run for office out there. We support that.
Yep. I'm curious about the cycles of time. You said around 52,000 BC to around 12,000 BC was Atlantis?
It started around 100,000 years ago, and it ended around 12,000 years ago. But it had, 1, 2, 3, like four incarnations, but 3 periods of destructions. Let's just say, so 100,000 to 52,000, that's 1.
Yeah.
52,000 to 28,000, that's 2. 28,000 to 22,000, that's 3. 22,000 to 12,000, that's 4.
So if you subscribe to the 26,000 year zodiac cycle of the evolution of consciousness, that's 4 complete cycles of the zodiac. If we are coming out of the Kali Yuga, going into the Bronze Age, going into the Golden Age, and that's how it's been for so long, was Atlantis in existence when all these cycles were happening? Or was that island of Atlantis, before it even broke up, experiencing the devolution of consciousness, which is why there was the military-industrial complex splitting everything up, and then they had the Golden Age after that? And how does that connect to the primitive cultures that existed on the planet at the same time?
Yeah, so you guys are probably following this if you've been following Neil's work and the Worker Portal to Ascension. But sort of what we're talking about is that the Vedas, the ancient wisdom keepers, the rishis of the Vedas, talk about the fact that there are 4 basic cycles: the Golden Age, the Sattva Yuga, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age, or the Kali Yuga. But really, there are cycles within cycles. At the highest level of the Golden Age within the Golden Age, we are 3/4 spirit, 1/4 matter. In the Silver Age within the Golden Age, we move down to we're a little more densified, the Bronze more densified, finally the Kali Yuga within the Golden Age more densified. But then it moves to the Golden Age within the Silver Age. And the Silver Age within the Silver Age, and so forth. So the ancients say that we moved into the Kali Yuga around 3114 BC. So that's about 5,000 years ago. Well, as we noticed, it wasn't all, terrible. I mean, really, there's a lot of high cultures that came up. Greece, Egypt, India, all of these were Sattva cultures. Sattva meaning they were aligned to try to raise the consciousness of the people who lived in those civilizations. It doesn't mean they weren't dealing with, economics and politics and having to go to war occasionally, but they were basically their culture, their jewelry, their writings, their architecture, their clothing, everything was aligned. It had a deeper meaning. It had a spiritual meaning behind it that gave you the message, hey, this is a temporary earth school and your real home is in heaven, and you are a soul experiencing earth school, and try to remember that in the way that you live every day. And that is why we're still so intrigued by the Egyptian cultures and the Indian cultures, which became the motherland cultures even today. So what happened in this evolution, when Jesus came in, we can sort of say we were at the lowest point, but maybe not quite, but close. I mean, the Roman Empire put a lot of physical plane order, but they really lost their contact with spirit. They were really successful in war. Prior to that, it was the Greeks, and the Greeks were philosophers. And I mean, really, they were quite amazing. For all the war that went on, they discovered the atom, Democritus, that was around 300 BC. They knew about the Earth and the planets going around the sun. They discovered supposedly latitude and longitude. At least we give them credit for that. But in truth, the Egyptians knew that before them, and so forth. So we kind of really went through the dark of the dark during the Inquisition, and that would have been around probably about 1300 to 1850 AD. The Spanish Inquisition ended around 1850. That would have been the last time they burned people at the stake for witchcraft. So there were, they say that there's something like 50 million people that were murdered prior to the Inquisition and during the Inquisition by, religious authorities who basically viewed every other form except the Catholic form as competition, including the Jewish form, the Buddhist forms, and so forth. So we went through the dark of the dark. To me, that's the Kali Yuga within the Kali Yuga was that age, the dark ages of superstition and ignorance. We began to pull out of that 450 years ago during the time of the Renaissance. So we entered the Bronze Age within the Kali Yuga. And so now we're straddling between the Bronze Age and the Silver Age within the Kali Yuga. So each one of these ages is marked by certain things. The Dark Age, the Kali Yuga, is marked by ignorance and superstition. During the Middle Ages, 2%, 3% of the population could even read. They couldn't even read the Latin catechisms that they were being given. During the Bronze Age, logical thinking and rational science comes in. And thank God for that, because it began to pull us out of that just ignorance and fear state. And during the Silver Age, we begin to tune into spirit directly. We begin to channel and do healings and, work with crystals and work with energy medicine and all the things. We begin to discover the underlying patterns like fractal geometries and sacred geometries behind things. And that's really what this conference is about, is very much Silver Age, trying to move us even towards the Golden Age. During the Golden Age, we actually all remember that we are divine beings having a human experience and that we are all connected to one. Right. And so we're living in a society where we still have a lot of people in the Bronze Age, and that's okay. They need evidence. I like evidence. My dad was a lawyer. I'm all for evidence. But we're also working with people who are having direct contact with spirit and trying to make sense of it, because we weren't taught. We were taught that the prophets in the Bible could have it, but could we have it? We weren't taught that we could have it. And of course we can have it, because all of us have the spark of God within us.
Right now we're going through a remembrance on the planet. I've spoke a few times at this conference to other speakers about the fact that we're on a planet of amnesia, where we don't really truly remember everything, right? Now, in the Silver Age, you said the Golden Age is complete remembrance. What does the Silver Age represent in regards to remembrance? What level of remembrance do we have there?
I think we have partial remembrance. If you look around you, what we have right now, to me, even at this conference, we have all sorts of cool, tuned-in people. And we have people that are trying to make sense of what's happening to them. They know it's something profound. They're opening to their healing abilities, or they're beginning to channel, or they're beginning to get automatic writing, or they've had spirit guides appear to them, or they begin to receive, profound messages in their dream state. And because they weren't taught that this was okay, they're trying to find a framework to understand what's happening to them and how they can become better vessel for spirit, how they can live their life not stuck in a little cubicle doing something that they don't like to do, but to actually live a life that's true to their divine purpose. Right. And I think that that's the call, really, of the Silver Age.
And what is the amount of time that we are in the Silver Age? And is every age the same amount of time, or some ages are longer, shorter?
Actually, that's a great question. They say that the Kali Yuga, thank God, is the shortest age. So if you think about the Kali Yuga as one unit, the Bronze Age would be 2 units, double the length. The Silver Age would be 4 units, that would be quadruple the length. And the Golden Age would be 8 units. I don't have enough fingers. 8 units. So that's, even longer. So the good news is that even though we go down to the trash can, we do come back out. Yeah. And so, and the time that we're spending in the light is better than the time, and longer than the time we spend in the darkness. Thank God.
At one point I read the book of Revelations. I wanted to create a poem on it, so I took certain quotes from it and I created this hip-hop song on Revelations. And in there I saw 1,000 years of a golden age, right? Basically that was the terminology. And in the Bible, like, days could actually be longer, eons, right? But it was interesting to me that they weren't saying revelations that happen, we're all going to inherit this earth. It was literally saying something there that you can connect to the cycles of time. So this information is embedded in many scriptures. You want to go into maybe some detail on certain scriptures and things that have reached out to you that validate and confirm what we're talking about here?
Gosh, I've always been a very eclectic scholar, and I was raised, like many of you, traditional Christian. I always thought Jesus was awesome. I even written a book about him and his lost years and secret teachings. But I felt like that there was a lot of things that weren't being answered in the Bible. And I was probably that disturbing little girl in Sunday school that said, Cain and Abel, the only children of Adam and Eve, who did they marry? And like nobody could give me an answer. So I'm not so crazy about the God of the Old Testament, because that to me seems to be God with a little g, because it's, hellfire, brimstone, and damnation, and go kill every man, woman, chicken, pig, and goat, and rape the virgins. And that doesn't really sound to me like the benevolent God with the big G, but I'm definitely all on board with Jesus's version of God, which is the God of unity consciousness. However, I've also been a student very much of the Puranas, the Upanishads, the Eastern tradition, the Egyptian mysteries that talk about these things, the Greek mysteries. I think those are wonderful. The Pythagorean mysteries, the Orphic mysteries that knew about the eternal nature of the soul and talked about the landscapes of heaven from which we come. The Druid mysteries are, I've trained in those traditions. So, all of the great traditions, if you go back far enough, talk about the cycles of time. And all of them have one very important symbol, which is something called the Ouroboros. And it's a snake biting its tail. And you find it in Japan, in China, in the Mayan culture, in the Native American culture, the Druid culture, the Egyptian culture, the Greek culture, the Theosophists, the Masons. All of them have it. And it really has to do with the fact that we go around this circle of 26,000 years and we return to the place where we started, and we know it as if for the first time. And in lots of ways, that's kind of where we are now. We are nearing the end of an age, and we have started a new age. In fact, the Theosophists talk about the fact that we we moved into the 0 degrees of the age of Aquarius in 1939. Now, there are 30 degrees in every astrological age. It takes 72 years to move through 1 degree. So if you multiply, 30 degrees in an astrological sign by 72 years, you come up with 2,160 years. So each one of these ages is approximately that long. So the Theosophists say that we moved into the very first year of 0 degrees of Aquarius in 1939. So if you add that with 72, it ends, that 0 degree ended in 2011, which meant that 2012, when the Mayans talked about, would have been the very first year of 1 degree of the age of Aquarius. Yeah. And if you look back at the last 72 years and you see what we've done, I mean, we've gone from the telegraph to the telephone to the fax machine to the cell phone to the computer to airplanes in the sky to, secret teleportation devices. We've come light years in 72 years. So imagine the next 72 years if we don't destroy ourselves or get too big for our britches.
So all this advanced technology,
as we say in the South.
Right. All this advanced technology is coming out. I actually saw a graph once of, the progression of technology over the last 200 years, right? And it was like basically started like this, right? And then and now it's almost vertical. Like, we are becoming exponential in technology. The question really is that how are we going to use this technology? The technology will only be used. Some people are anti-technology. Some people are anti-artificial intelligence, especially a lot of people in the consciousness movement. And I feel that it's not about the technology. It's about the level of our consciousness and how awake we are, and that's how we're going to use it. So how do you see this unfolding in regards to the technology in the world, and what do you feel is the possibilities that we can do to this planet and with this new technology?
Well, you always ask the greatest questions, doesn't he? So let me just say that certainly we have some movies that are pretty scary about the misuse of AI intelligence. We can look at Terminator. Gosh, what an incredible series that has resonated for 30 years, because it speaks to all of us about the possibility that we could develop highly intelligent beings that don't have heart, they don't have soul. And heart and soul is really what makes up consciousness. You can have all the mental constructs in the world, but if you don't have the soul behind it, then there's no tenderness, there's no compassion, there's no love, and ultimately there may be mastery of the physical world by machines, but there's not going to be unity consciousness, really. There's not going to be the power of love, because that only really comes through the heart. And the Egyptians knew this. This is one of the reasons why the heart was the most important thing in the halls of Amente. They didn't say, how much knowledge did you learn? They took your heart out and weighed your heart. And if you had a kind heart, a loving heart, a forgiving heart, then go on into heaven. But if you had a hard heart and a heavy heart, then you hadn't learned your lessons and you had to reincarnate. So this is a very big question. I do think we have to be extremely careful about AI. I think the most important thing is for us to stay connected with nature. And nature is the natural resonance of healing. It's the natural resonance of the planet that we're on, and all living things that come from this planet, including us. So I think that part of what's happening in technology is that the gray aliens have offered our government a lot of perks. And we have, taken them like a duck to water. The more toys, the better. You can go into any shopping mall, restaurant, and you see half the people or more, they're not even talking to each other. They're not even interacting with each other. They're not having a conversation of the heart. They've lost the gift of social contact. Instead, they're in their phones. And so I think it's a way of hooking people in with the gadgets and the gizmos that are, useful, and they can be fun, okay? But they're also distracting from the heart. They're distracting from connecting with each other and with nature. And I think that that's really the path we have to take. Machines should certainly be used to help us out. We've got them in automation. But there's no reason that we need to make machines intelligent and give them human bodies and set Terminator loose on the world. I think we should be smarter than that. Unfortunately, I don't think we are. I think that the military-industrial complex, and they're very good people. I want to just be very clear about this. There are a lot of wonderful people in the service. There are good people that are heroic people, that are courageous, who believe in democracy. They believe in America, they believe in the highest values, and they're there because they're good, valiant people. So I don't want in any way, for anything I say about that, to in any way dishonor them, because I have the utmost honor and respect for them. But I think that what happens is power that is unchecked feeds on itself. And there are two basic forces in the world, power and love. And when you're not hooked into love, you hook into power. And when we hook into power without love, it becomes power over. Instead of being open to change, we become crystallized and fixed in a hierarchical structure where, unfortunately, there are a lot of compromises that are made for people's ambitions and egos to get ahead. And so there could be 80%, 90% good people in the military, but the 5% or the 10% that are calling the shots at the top, or who have been trapped in the system after joining and making a career of something that they thought would be a noble calling, it becomes very difficult for them to become untrapped and to say, stop, let us put on the brakes. We shouldn't just, invent this technology because we can. We should think about the consequences, as the Native American elders would say, 7 generations forward. And that is about the caretaking of the earth. It's about the production of food, the way we treat our animals, what we're doing with those crazy Monsanto Terminator seeds that are, unbridled greed that can cause worldwide famine, creating people only having one source to be able to go to, get their food and their seeds. I mean, we're making crazy decisions, and it's up to us, the people who are conscious, to vote. Don't abstain from voting. We're in a democratic nation, unlike many nations that are ruled by tyrants. We may like our president or we may not like our president, but we have the choice to change the president. We have the choice to change those things that we don't like. And if we don't act, they will be taken away from us.
Right. Tricia, thank you so much for being with me. You are a true inspiration, and the awareness that you share has impacted my life and a lot of people that I know. And when I see you share the information and the way people, the look on their face with what you're conveying is truly awe-inspiring. I thank you for everything you're doing, for the wide range of topics that you cover, and for being the divine light and the divine feminine in this movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Neil.
Yeah, you're welcome. Love you.
Love you, brother.
Love you too.
He always says, love you, sister. I'm like, love you, brother. And we love you guys out there, too. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in.